The hypothesis of mental genesis of many somatic diseases is already widely accepted in all medicine. In highly civilized countries of the world, more and more patients are treated in clinics and hospitals, which are psychosomatic clinics and hospitals. This is a direction in the development of medical care which is particularly desired by the type 3 people suffering from the chronic somatosis. While it's not difficult to understand the mechanism of the formation of the episodic psychosis and that of the somatosis, where the psychosis substitutes the anxiety in almost visually verifiable way, it's difficult, however, to comprehend how chronic physical disease can be a substitute for the anxiety in the case of chronic somatosis. How does the mental process of the anxiety transform into a physiological and pathophysiological process? In addition, how is it possible for a single anxiety overload, even a very big one, to have such a lifelong effect in the form of an activated pathophysiological process? Let's try to answer the second question. The physiological processes are stored in the genes, unlike the mental processes. Accordingly, the former, that's the physiological processes, are not subject to such an immediacy, volatility, and fluctuations as the psyche processes. The physiological processes and all its variants, including pathological variants, are only the expression of genetic information and its changes during an individual life. Yes, we can change the form of this expression with all the methods available in a given historical era, and this is what the classical medicine has been doing since its beginning. But it has always been only symptomatic therapy, because a real therapy would have to be able to change the record of the genetic information, encoding pathophysiological processes so that they turn back into physiological processes. Is it possible? Let's note a very important thing. The acceptance of the psychogenicity hypothesis of numerous diseases is an undisputed issue in the world, despite the lack of a solid theory explaining the transformation from the mental process into a pathophysiological one. The publication of my books was one of the first steps in this direction. Thus, it's widely believed that it's likely that the genetic information may be altered under the influence of an intense mental situation. It's widely believed that it's likely that the genetic information may be altered under the influence of an intense mental situation. My work details this intense mental situation. Namely, I remind you that it's an overload in the anxiety emotional intelligence ratio. In plain language, it's a critical anxiety attack that far exceeds the capacity of a person's anxiety emotional intelligence. But it would be wrong to think that the anxiety causes directly the altering of the genetic setup. No, it's not possible. The mental dimension, as I wrote about it, is a completely different dimension than the physical dimension. So these two dimensions never really communicate directly with each other. It's impossible. But indirectly, it's possible and even necessary for the functioning of organisms with a higher degree of organization, and especially those with the highest degree of organization, such as that of the humans. The genome is a kind of a hard disk with a record of all physiological processes. Let's add it's a hard disk with as many copies as the number of cells in a living organism. Therefore, it's almost an infinite number. So, in addition to genes directly responsible for all physiological processes, the genome has also regulatory genes. And these genes turn out to be crucial for the transformation of the mental processes into the physiological processes. The question remains, however, how these genome regulatory genes come into any contact with the human psyche, since I have just emphasized so much that these are two different dimensions of existence, dimensions that cannot communicate with each other. In order to illustrate this impossibility, I often say that if the psyche could communicate with the physical organism, we could control physiological processes with our thoughts. Yes, we do control, but only when it comes to managing the striated muscles that move various parts of the body, so that we can move the head, the eyes, the tongue, the limbs. Our psyche has, however, no influence on the rest. That is, almost all the processes taking place in our body. So, where is the answer to the question that has been put so many times? How does the genome come into contact with the psyche? The anxiety makes it possible. No, I don't contradict what I wrote a few lines, what I said several minutes ago, that the anxiety is a mental process, as a mental process cannot affect physiological processes because they are two different dimensions of existence. Well, the anxiety manifests as a mental phenomenon, but its nature is absolutely physical. As I have described already in previous lectures, I explained this physical nature of anxiety. In order not to repeat this, about what I have already said about the anxiety, I will only say that the anxiety gave the universe a new dimension of existence, the psychic dimension, and writing and saying figuratively, we can say about that the anxiety has its roots in the physical dimension of the nature. But from these roots, a new quality, a psychological dimension grows. The physical nature of anxiety, as I explained many times so far, what I repeat for those who have not read and heard it, the physical nature, this is the spontaneous, continuous electromagnetic emission of the brain waves. The central nervous system communicates physiologically with the autonomous nervous system, which is innervating the organs. The central nervous system influences also through the secreted neurotransmitters, the endocrine system. The neurotransmitters diffuse from the synaptic space to the intracellular space and then go to the blood. The secreted hormones and neurotransmitters, like any other substances, even in minimal amounts in the blood, such as neurotransmitters, reach all the intercellular space through the blood system and they diffuse to every cell of the body. When they come to the cell, they bind to the receptors present on the cell surface or pass through the cell membrane, and in both cases, they reach the nucleus directly or indirectly, activating the genes responsible for various enzymatic cascades in the cell. And they come to activate the regulatory genes, that is, the genes that regulate the activity of other genes. Okay, but how does anxiety, that's electromagnetic brain emissions specific for the anxiety, affect the release of neurotransmitters and hormones into the circulatory system? The explanation of this phenomenon is very simple for people interested in biology and physics. Well, as some of you maybe remember, the neurons at rest remain in a state of polarization, in a state in which the cell membranes on the entire surface of the neuron show an electrical voltage between the inner and outer state of the cell membrane.